Hi everyone, hope we're safe and well. Welcome to our second lesson on Romeo and Juliet, and today what we're going to do is we're going to run through the main characters and just some brief background information about each of them before we get into the reading and the play. What I've chosen to do is I'm going to use imagery from the 1996 version, the Baz Luhrmann directed version, just so you can get to grips with which character items and so it stays consistent. I would recommend watching this version. It is a good version. Obviously, the modern setting can muddy issues a little bit, but the narrative, the plot, and the Shakespearean language is very significant in there. So I really hope this is useful. It's going to be important for you to be making notes as we go through on each of the characters and their important characteristics and their role within the play. Okay, like I said, today we're going to be making notes on each of the main characters and looking at their characteristics, looking at the way they behave, looking at some of the key plot points to do with their responsibilities throughout the play. So as we're going through this video, what I'd like you to do is to be making notes. What would also be useful is getting some images of the characters so that you become familiar with who they are and how they, so when you watch the Romeo and Juliet version, you are familiar with who they are as they appear on screen. This is a video that you can go back to and you can watch it again just to clarify any issues or to recheck any characters, just to check the relationships between them as we read through the play as well. Okay, the first of the characters we're going to consider is Romeo. So as the play begins, Romeo is lovesick. He's recently been dumped by, for want of a better word, by his love Rosaline, and he is sick with love. He is finding the world is against him and he's in a pit of sorrow and despair. So we have this sort of melancholic character. It's quite a useful word, that melancholic, where it's someone who is gripped by sorrow. Romeo is a very passionate young man and he feels love very, very deeply. And when he meets Juliet for the first time, this is shown in the instant attraction and the instant connection that he feels with her. However, he's also prone to violent tempers. Compared to a lot of the other male characters, he's more gentle and more sensitive. However, he is still prone to these acts of violence and spontaneity. So he does react quite strongly to provocation, and he does resort to violence on occasions at some points within the play. He is well loved by his family. He's the only child of Lord and Lady Montague, so he belongs to the Montague family. He is someone who is well respected and well known throughout Verona, which is where the play is set, and he's a man who is very well thought of. He has a close group of friends, a close group of associates, friends and family members who would stick by him no matter what. So he commands that sense of loyalty. Romeo can also be considered to be quite a rash character who makes impulsive decisions. So for example, he chooses to go to a party where he's not invited and he knows that will cause trouble and provocation. He believes in fate and he believes in the destiny that's written in the stars for you. So he uses fate and chance and he actually believes them to be true, but then goes against what better judgments might have been. So Romeo does make snap decisions. He's quite impulsive and he's quite rash. He does occasionally resort to violence and he does occasionally react in a violent manner. Compared to the same time, he's quite a juxtaposed character because he's quite sensitive, romantic, and he's quite idealistic about love. Juliet is the romantic heroine of the play. She is the foil to Romeo. She is his compatible partner in the play. She is the daughter of Lord and Lady Capulet, who are the rival family to the Montagues. So naturally, Romeo and Juliet should be enemies. They should be from warring factions, these two families that absolutely despise and hate each other. Juliet is a sensitive and resourceful character who believes in love but is much less rash and much more rational than Romeo is. She doesn't do things hastily. She takes her time and she thinks about things. Now, Juliet should potentially be quite submissive. So she's a daughter of a wealthy man. She should be listening to what her father has to say, and she should be taking his advice and doing what he tells her to. What actually happens in the play is Juliet is a bit more rebellious than that. She is a free thinker. She's a free spirit. And although she respects her father and mother, she makes her own decisions, which is going against possible stereotypes that we would potentially have for her. Like I mentioned, she is a bit more rational than Romeo. She's a lot more grounded in the real world. She doesn't use quite as much romantic and flowery language that Romeo does, certainly when they first meet. But she is a romantic at heart. She falls in love very quickly, and she falls very deeply in love with the relationship with Romeo. Juliet is also quite a brave character. She makes decisions that she knows will be challenging and will be difficult, and yet is very committed to that. She is not afraid to take risks on occasion, and she will challenge authority. She can be seen to be quite headstrong and independent. So she has a lot of very, very positive characteristics, challenging perhaps what we would have seen as the prejudices and the preconceptions that we might have thought about in a patriarchal society, which should be dominated by people like her father and potentially her husband, whoever her father chooses that to be. Okay, the third character we're going to consider is Mercutio. So Mercutio is not related to, but he is loyal to the Montague family. So he is Romeo's best friend and he's Romeo's confidant. He's someone that Romeo goes to when he's in trouble, rather than going to his parents. Mercutio employs both the best and the worst of Romeo's key characteristics. He's more confident than Romeo is. He's much more self-assured. He has much less self-doubt, if you like. He's a much more flamboyant personality than Romeo is. And that comes across in the way that he speaks to him and the way that he gives advice to Romeo. But also he is on the further end of the scale on his rashness and impulsivity. Mercutio is very, very quick to anger, and he will not stand by and take offence when someone is insulting him or he perceives someone to be insulting him. He will react very quickly and very sharply to that. Much like we said with Romeo, he has the more sensitive romantic side to him. Mercutio doesn't quite have that. He's much more aggressive and much more dominant and much more powerful in that, and that ultimately leads to his downfall. His strengths are things like his loyalty, his friendship with Romeo, and his desire to see the best for Romeo. He wants Romeo to, at the start of the play, he would like Romeo to get over his love sickness for Rosaline, and he sets in motion a plan to hopefully achieve that. So with Mercutio, the key characteristics we're looking for is someone who is impulsive, someone who is quite rash, someone who is confident, arrogant perhaps, self-assured. Lots of positive characteristics, but obviously he is exemplifying a lot of the negative characteristics associated with male characters. Okay, and the fourth character we're going to look at is a direct contrast and a parallel to Mercutio, and that is Tybalt. Tybalt is Juliet's cousin, so he is a Capulet. He's of the Capulet family. And much like Mercutio, he is a very aggressive and angry man. We don't actually see too much of Tybalt, but what we do see is someone who takes great offence and in the very smallest of things that he perceives that have slighted him or made fun of him or made fun of his family. And he takes great offence at that and he reacts very, very strongly. His nickname is the Prince of Cats, which is meant to represent his sword fighting abilities, his elegance and his grace in sword fighting. So we have a character who is respected and who is known for his violent outbursts and known for his sword fighting prowess, his ability to fight. And from the very first scene that we see Tybalt, he fans the flames, if you like, of conflict. He is someone who is looking for any sort of perceived insults to him that he can use as an excuse to start to exemplify those male characteristics of violence and aggression. So he very much contrasts with Romeo, who's this more romantic and more sensitive. Tybalt, it shows hatred towards that sort of sensitive and romantic side of personality. He's very much about anger, aggression and violence. Okay, the next characters I've paired together as a group, and you'll hopefully see why in a second. As previously mentioned, Romeo is from the Montague family. Juliet is from the Capulets. When they meet and fall in love, that is going against all of the societal conventions of the time. You are meant to stay loyal to your family. You certainly do not go in romantic entanglements with your enemies. So these two characters, they need a confidant. They need someone who they can talk to about this. And speaking to the families is probably not the way to go about it. If Juliet was to go to her father and say, I've fallen for a Montague, then he would immediately crush this. If Romeo was to do the same with his father or his mother, then potentially they would do the same thing. So they need someone who is almost outside of the family. Romeo chooses to put his confidence in Friar Lawrence. So Friar Lawrence is a monk who Romeo goes to initiate the wedding ceremony, and Friar Lawrence sees this as an opportunity to reconcile the two families together. So Friar Lawrence is essentially a good character. He's someone who's trying to bring together the two families and stop the violence that's occurring between them. However, he is a bit narrow-minded and he's a bit short-sighted. He's overconfident in his plan and he overcomplicates things. He doesn't end up following through with helping Romeo and Juliet in a way that they potentially could have made it work. He concocts a plan which is a quite deceptive plan, if you like. However, he is kind-hearted and he wants the marriage to succeed, and he has the best of intentions for Romeo. Similarly with the nurse is actually much more of a mother figure to Juliet than her own mother. The nurse acts as this person who Juliet can go to and speak to in confidence, and she shares with the nurse a lot of her feelings and emotions. The nurse, for her part, is a very loyal character who understands Juliet's emotions and understands her much more than her own parents do. And the nurse actually is used as a messenger to send messages between Romeo and Juliet when they couldn't physically meet. So both these characters, the friar and the nurse, are good characters who have the best of intentions for Romeo and Juliet, and they want to try and make the marriage between them succeed. Okay, the next character to consider is quite a minor character in terms of the play, but obviously important in terms of the development of one of our key characters, and that is Benvolio. Benvolio is Romeo's cousin, so he is probably the closest male relative to Romeo emotionally, and he is someone who tries his best to get Romeo back on track and back on side. Benvolio is cynical about love. He's quite realistic. He's less passionate than Romeo and he's less sort of inclined to fall in love quickly. He is surprised when Romeo talks so frankly about love and about his emotions. However, he's also a lot less aggressive than Mercutio is. Benvolio is more of a peacekeeper. He's someone who's trying to bring peace between the two families, and he, at every opportunity that he gets, he tries to de-escalate conflict, if you like, rather than to instigate it. So a positive character, and someone who directly contrasts with Juliet's cousin Tibbles and his aggression and his violence. Okay, the next group of characters I've paired together, again, hopefully you'll be able to see why. And these are the characters that I would consider the outsiders of the families. These are characters who aren't actually related to either the Capulets or the Montagues. The first of which is Paris. So Paris is one of the other noble families members, and he wants to marry Juliet, so he is a direct competitor to Romeo. Now, Juliet's father sees Paris as a potential suitor and someone who would be a good match for Juliet. So Paris's role in the play is to be there as a lingering background character for Juliet, someone who is there. And when Juliet's father announces that she's to marry Paris, obviously this causes all sorts of confusion and anger and misery for Juliet. The second character we want to consider is Prince Escalus. So Prince Escalus is the Prince of Verona. So he is the person who is in charge and is in charge of laying down the law. At the start of the play, Escalus puts down the decree that if any further violence disturbs the city streets, then it will be punishable by death. So we have this lordly character who's overseeing everything, who's fed up with this conflict between the Capulets and the Montagues, and is now willing to stamp his authority on that and to say enough is enough with this. So two characters who are outsiders but also have massive important roles to play within the relationships and the dynamics between the Capulets and the Montagues. Obviously Paris coming in as an outsider to disrupt that relationship between Romeo and Juliet, but also we have Prince Escalus, who has this lingering threat of death hanging over anyone who is to cause violence on his city streets. Okay, and the final set of characters that I'm going to look at is the parents of Romeo and Juliet. We have Lord and Lady Montague, who are Romeo's parents, and we have Lord and Lady Capulet, who are Juliet's parents. Now, the parents in the play actually appear as quite distant characters from their children. They appear as if they don't have too much of an understanding about the emotional state of their children. The Montagues at the start of the play are looking for Romeo because they haven't seen him. They want to know why he's upset. And they want to comfort him, but he is not really interested in speaking to them. The Montagues seem quite a distant relationship with Romeo, even though they care for him. They seem to have quite a distant relationship, and he's not. Romeo certainly isn't the most forthcoming with information to them. He doesn't actually go and seek them out for help, advice, and support. He goes to either Mercutio or to the friar, someone else. Juliet's parents feature more in the play. We have Lord Capulet and Lady Capulet, and Lord Capulet in particular plays a very important role. His society role potentially would be to make a match for Juliet, and then she would be expected to follow his advice to marry the man that he found suitable for her. And of course he chooses Paris, and he arranges that wedding for Juliet. Now when Juliet challenges this, and when Juliet goes against his decree, he becomes angry, and we see the darker side of masculine power there. We have Lady Capulet, who's desperate for Juliet to follow through with this marriage and to please her father. So we have these parental relationships that are very much of their time. We talked about the context in the previous video and how parental relationships and loyalty to your family was significant and important. The parents in the play, certainly at the start of the play, seem to have quite distant relationships with our two key protagonists, Romeo and Juliet. Okay, so for you to do, what I'd like to do is to rewatch this video and then to create character maps for each of the sections for the different characters, noting down the key notes that I've made on the video here, just so you've got some indication about what these characters are like, what their sort of personalities are like, and perhaps some of the significant relationships between them. If you go back to the very start, the family tree is quite interesting, having a look at which side the people are on. Have a look at that. Make your own notes. Like I said, for this video I've used images from the 1996 version, so you can get to grips with what the characters look like in that version. There are other versions obviously of Romeo and Juliet, and you can use images from wherever you like. When I'm talking through things, I will potentially be using clips and notes from the 1996 version, so if you want to keep consistent, then that is a good version to be using. Make your notes, have a look at the task on the next as part of this video, and then if you stay tuned at the end, we've got today's film recommendation. Right, I hope you stay tuned through all that, because that's the longest video I've done by an absolute mile. Right, for today's film recommendation, I'm going for something that was very close to my heart. It was one of my favourite films growing up, and I've gone for an animated feature just to keep us all happy and all singing, and that is The Jungle Book. This was the first film that I can remember watching in its entirety. So it's got some fantastic songs, amazing characters. Baloo was always my favourite. So seek it out if you haven't seen it and enjoy. Next time we're going to start having a read through the play, so we'll be looking at the start of Act 1, looking at what the characters are doing, the scenarios, the situations, and how the play opened with a violent brawl. Until then, stay safe, and I'll see you for the next video.